All right, if we're recording, good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to our afternoon live edition of Let's Unpack. Today we'll be discussing the show topic of Pushing Through the Funk, a conversation about depression. I am joined by my lovely, wonderful co-host and friend, Miss Nita Kellogg of Project Diva.
Hey.
And we will begin introducing our other two very special guests today.
Well, to my left, her hair is kind of, let's see, for Facebook Live, she's here.
Right.
Go this way. Go this way.
Right. Everybody.
I have Tiffany Dykes. She is an amazing woman, a great friend, a grant writer, our grant writer, as well as a mother and conscious depression navigator. It's going to be amazing to hear her story today. And next to Jatan, we have
Miss Christina Gonzalez, who is a licensed social worker and clinical therapist, and wonderful friend and colleague, and a professor as well as at the University of Minnesota. And I will let her add anything additional she would like to add at this time.
Thank you. That's it. And I also am familiar with being a recipient of services. So not only do I provide services to folks, I also receive services to be as healthy and approaching whole as possible. So
thank you both.
Do we want to give Tiffany some time also?
Yes, and Tiffany, if you could explain to us as much as you feel safe in sharing your connection to this topic today.
So just as a person who has kind of dealt with depression my whole life and watched people in my family deal with it, and also currently navigating it with my children. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you for that. We'll just jump right in. Anyone who's unfamiliar with the topic, again, today, we're going to be talking about depression. The show title is Pushing Through the Funk. You can check this out later on YouTube. Again, the name of the station or show is Let's Unpack. So let's get started, shall we? One of the first questions I have for the two of you, and we'll start with you, Tiffany, is how would you define depression?
It's my sunken place. That's what it is. It's when I sink down into my sunken place and I jump in my hole for a little bit. Well, now it's for a little bit. It has not always been that way, though.
Right.
So
I appreciate that. How about you, Christina? When you hear depression, what is the definition for you?
I think for me, it's interesting. I'm going to keep my professional clinical hat on for a moment and say that you really need to look at what life looked like before folks talk about their hard times. Because some people just walk in the world a little bit melancholic, and that's okay. The thing I always like to ask folks is to start with, what's changed? How are you eating? How are you sleeping? How are you engaging with folks that you love? I mean, I even talk about pooping, because I think what we do in our regulatory systems, if they're all out of whack, it's a really good information for how folks are engaging in the world. So is their family life impaired? Is their ability to get up and go to work impaired? I mean, we all get in funks, right? And I think what I hear Tiffany saying is she sinks even more deeply in, and that then impacts her ability to be her best self and her best mom. And the same goes for individuals who do struggle with depression. And so really asking folks, what's changed? What's hard? Can you pinpoint a few experiences that have impacted that overwhelming feeling of sad and hopelessness, and let's unpack it and let's talk about what that might be about.
So one of the things that I would like to ask is, Jatan, for this to be our inaugural Let's Unpack session, why was this topic most important to you?
It's most important to me because I am too a great navigator of the system I call of depression. I don't like to label myself as one who has that diagnosis, though I do. And I wanted to expose that and share that because then it releases that shame from myself as well as the folks I'm sharing it with. And I wholeheartedly don't believe, while we're all running around here preaching health and wellness and things of that nature, I don't believe we're whole healthy or whole well if we're not mentally together. There's no way we can be physically healthy. And if a mother and a father or the leader of a home isn't physically and mentally well, there's no way that the home is stable yet healthy. So this is a topic near and dear to my own heart for me and my own family.
And part of that is because going into the school systems, it's not just a reflection of the parents,
Correct.
But now we have children who are also going through it,
Absolutely.
who are needing to process as well.
Absolutely.
So it's a very important topic, I think, to all of us because we care about that next generation.
Absolutely.
And we're getting older.
Yes.
And we are navigating this and wanting to be able to hand the tools down to our babies.
Which is very important. Very important that our kids be able to see us be able to self-regulate and process through situations. Otherwise, they won't know how to do that themselves. Absolutely.
Can I just add one thing? I feel like it's really important. There's also shame and stigma around talking about your heart, especially in communities of color. And so I just want to say that we're not crazy and we're not weak because we're going to talk about our big sad heart stuff. We're going to acknowledge that it exists, right? And the title is Pushing Through the Funk, and I think this other piece is pausing in the funk and being like, I'm in a funk. And then get curious about what that means. Like, how long has this been here? And how does that feel? And is it okay for me to talk to people about that and ask for help? Because I think a lot of us have received many messages.
Right.
And so to Nita's point, the closer we can get to health, the closer we can get the generations in front of us to health and model help seeking and being honest and naming our truth.
I think one thing that was really helpful for me is when my therapist described it as a thinking error. And then I had to retrain my brain.
Right on.
Like I had to stop going down that same pathway. It's like you go down the pathway, it's dark, it's dreary, you're going to trip over a couple of rocks, you're going to fall, you're going to stumble, and it's like the next time I get to that pathway, I have to go left. I can't go right.
Right on.
So that just kind of resonated with me when you were just talking.
Oh, and your point points to how, well, no matter how hard we work, it's just the way our brains become habituated or experience those connections in those neurons. Like, I see this, then this happens. And over time, our brain literally doesn't work in the same way to create synapses and neurons to get out of the funk. And so it's these long patterns.
Yes.
So it's our brain's chemistry that when they see that path, they go down. It goes down it. It's outside of Tiffany's will and control. But for you to be able to go, wait, I'm on that path. I'm going to try a new behavior.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That is a good segue into question number 2. For those of you who know my story, Project Diva was created out of the need for me to be able to give girls a space, Black girls in particular, a space to just be, to authentically talk about what was going on with them. There's a historical story to Black girls, the Black American girl that's different from an African American girl, that I felt has needed to be talked about. And so this topic is very special to me because my mother has catatonic schizophrenia, which means that she hears voices. And her breakdown was when I was 12. And so as a child with a younger brother and a mother who is saying that there's people talking about her upstairs, trying to process that and still function was a really challenging thing. And so the question is, like, what are some of the signs and symptoms? Because as a kid, it was like, okay, we eating dinner, I don't hear the voices. Like, shit now, Mama, I don't know. What are you talking about? Okay, well, how about me and my brother, we'll just go to the bedroom, watch some TV until you figure this out. And so wanting to really understand or like have a real conversation, you guys, about like, what do these symptoms and signs look like, knowing that there's a historical situation amongst Black women, but just women in general, like, what are some of those symptoms and signs that you guys would, want to talk about on a real level?
I think the biggest one for me, and I'm going to put it in a way that everybody can understand, is I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to be around anybody. And that extends to the kids. That's just not other adults. It's within my immediate household. Like, you isolate yourself. You don't sleep. Sometimes you don't eat. Sometimes you don't even move. I've gone months sometimes, and there have been periods of months where I didn't leave the house. You don't bathe. You don't brush your teeth. You don't comb your hair. Like, it's just, it's not insane, but it's hard. It's hard.
So what would you guys think?
Yeah, I think she hit them. I mean, there's clinical words for everything that Tiffany described, but she hit it. Hyper or hyposomnia, so too much sleep or too little sleep.
I'm a sleeper.
Yep. See, everyone does it different, right? Weight gain, weight loss, irritability. I mean, you hit them on the head. A feeling of hopelessness. The clinical term too is usually for clinical diagnoses. It needs to be around for a couple weeks as well. That's what you hit. You said sometimes it's months, right? So again, a bad day is different than a series of weeks where you're feeling low energy. I do want to point out in our young people, sad looks mad a lot. So while this is how it might manifest for adults, especially for our young boys, depression, which is sadness, right? It's sadness, looks like mad a lot in young children, and it gets misunderstood. So while that's hitting for you, huh, Tiffany? Right? And it's the first thing my 11-year-old brown boy goes to when he's got something sad going on. He gets pissed, and I have to say, well, let's talk about what else is under your mad, right? And it's usually because his 15-year-old dog just died, or he and his dad had a hard conversation about soccer, or, he had a friendship issue. But mad for little young people and adults too, and for our men of color, mad can be a mask for sad often. And for women, I'm not being gender specific, but there's a lot in there. So
I was just gonna say, my teenager told me one time. He said, "I just went through this period of months where I woke up mad, and I didn't even know why.
Mm-hmm.
I was just angry all the time, and I couldn't explain it.
Right.
And it was the depression. But it took for me to get my own help to help him with that.
And the hard part is then folks in systems see these kids getting mad and they try to extinguish that behavior, and they don't get beneath, where's your loss?
Right.
What's your sad about, right? And so that's where there's a lot of misunderstanding. It's just a rageful, angry kid. And it's like, well,
yeah.
And there might be some other things happening.
So I have a question about that. So, okay, so we're talking about, like you said, like, he was depressed and it came up as bad.
Yeah.
But then, like, what are some of those things that get us there? You know what I'm saying? Like, because that's the root, right? Like, or more of the root is, okay, we've gotten to this point where we're like, okay, I am depressed. Like, I am. But what, like, along that route is getting us there that we don't talk about?